What's going on, Imperials? It's Emperor Cubone here. Originally in Galar, there was an intriguing little apple Pokemon, Applin, who was surprisingly a dragon, and honestly that seemed like it was the most notable thing about it. I mean, it did have two very different evolutions, but they sort of consolidated back together with a shared Gigantamax form, and that was about it. Skip to only one generation later, and apparently this apple core Pokemon had more bite to it, and wasn't done by adding a third evolution, being only the third Pokemon ever to have more than two branches, in the vein of Eevee and Tyrogue before it. You could argue Burmy, I guess, but 3 forms of one Pokemon does not count. But not to be outdone, Applin took things a step further and had the new Diplin also evolve into an even more powerful form. Not even Eevee could muster that without getting so much as a Mega. But if adding a third evolution happened again after so many generations, and even going beyond that, who's to say that they can't surprise us with another new random branching evolution? So let's take a look at which Pokemon might be best suited to get the Applin treatment. Number 6. Wurmple. This one might seem fairly obvious, but clearly the best candidates for this idea are Pokemon who can already take branching paths when they evolve, and Wurmple is already unique in having both of its evolutions also evolve again. Maybe that's because nobody's really impressed with the Cocoon Pokemon, but Silcoon and Cascoon, despite being boring pure bug types, grow into alternate typings, with Beautifly gaining the flying element while Dustox becomes poison. Now, these types do suit their final forms, but who's to say that Wurmple couldn't see another option? Its evolutions are determined by random personality values after all, so you could just program in a new one. I mean, if Masquerain stayed a water type, it easily could have been a third evolution option for Hoenn's regional bug. And I guess if Surskit had shorter legs, it could kind of even pull off being a middle pupa stage. However, we would more likely see another mono-bug brother for the previous Cocoons, but the final evolutions could be any number of things. They could be part Dark-type, or part Fairy-type, or maybe even Ghost or Grass. Actually, probably not Grass specifically, because Hoenn had a lot of that already in the early routes. But the point is, Wurmple could provide even greater coverage while also turning into more kinds of insects. Instead of bringing in new bugs, we could have just had Wurmple evolve into an electric beetle or a psychic ladybug, and to be like Applin, we could even throw in some extra evolution like Gigantamax Butterfree or something like that on the end of one of its lines, putting it in a camp that very few other Pokemon have been able to reach over the years. Number 5. Slowpoke. I was going to disqualify Slowpoke for this because none of its stages changed their typing, but then I realized that the Applin line are all the same types as well, so I guess that's fine, just not quite as fun. However, Slowpoke was a Pokemon that got one of those Johto branches, and it was interesting because what made them different Pokemon was almost solely the placement of the shelter that latched onto them. Slowbro has it on its tail, and Slowking has it on its head as a crown of sorts. So wouldn't it stand to reason that there could be other forms as well? Maybe not, because the Galarian Slowbro has it on its arm and is still a Slowbro, not somehow another kind of species, and then Galarian Slowking is just the same Pokemon even though the Shelder seems to have almost completely taken over it. So I think we could believably see a Shelder somewhere else, like maybe in the middle of its back or something, to be a different third evolution. Or maybe on its foot so they can use it like a rocket and actually go really fast. Who knows? Also, if we wanted to keep Slowbro's Mega in the mix, that would be a perfect way to keep the Hydrapple angle going, to maintain an even further evolution past the other 3. Or maybe the new evolution has the Shelder grow so much that it becomes a tank or uses some other kind of weapon. Although at that point, I guess maybe we should just go with the Shelder line and have them gain the Turban evolution like the Gold and Silver Beta. But I don't think it would hurt the Slowpoke line at all to throw in another 2 evolutions for good measure. Number 4. Tauros and Miltank. Now this one is a bit different, and maybe you would argue it's more of the Tyrogue treatment than Applin. However, I do think it would be pretty great to finally have a pre-evolution between these bovine buddies to hatch from an egg, but we can take it a bit further by giving this hypothetical bridge another evolution as well. Probably not Bouffalant, since Tauros is already the male evolution with Miltank being the female one, unless you use some sort of item to get the Unova battering throw. That could maybe work because you would probably need some excuse to evolve into a third species anyway, but I'm partial to a new third option instead. Well, it wouldn't quite be a third one, now would it? since Tauros has gotten 3 brand new forms all on its own, so having a new Pokemon to breed specifically for those variations that you want would make it a lot easier to collect them all. I mean, they're even labeled the Aqua Breed or the Blaze Breed, despite the fact that you can't actually breed to get them, which is just insulting. So maybe a bonus creature like a water buffalo or even a musk ox or something could be an excellent offshoot for said theoretical baby calf to evolve into the previous cow Pokemon that we've already had for years. And maybe we could throw in an evolution for Miltank specifically to match the other Johto revamps and make up for the fact that Tauros has so many extra forms lately. Mix that all together and I think we've got ourselves a prime winner. Number 3, Snorunt. I thought about putting Ralts here because everybody loves that line, but it might be hard to get a new one in when the other two have already had Megas, although I guess that could be on the table with the new Legends game, who knows. But I would just settle for adding in Iron Valiant officially as an evolution. So instead, I think we should have Snorunt. When I first saw Snorunt and Glalie, I was honestly just kind of confused as to what was going on. It's like a living hat or something? But I soon grew to love the first ever pure ice types and used them multiple times. But then things got even better when Sinnoh gave them a branched evolution, Frostlass, not just having more for the sake of it, but also being part ghost type. And to me, that's what makes a great branching evolution, bringing something to the table that you couldn't possibly have before instead of just some mild stat alterations. Also, like Slowbro, Glalie too got a Mega, but I don't know that it would be different enough to be its own evolution, maybe if you added in the Dark type or something, but I could believe another random evolution being added with yet another type combination. It could even be one of the few unused pairings that Ice has, although Ice and Normal doesn't really seem all that fun. However, Ice and Poison, still on the table, so I'm sure that they could find some other obscure yokai, fable ice creature that would fit with being a little venomous. It might be odd to have a branch of 2 poisonous stages coming after Snorunt, but then maybe the middle stage could be another type altogether, like maybe adding Dark if you didn't want to slap that on the Mega version as the final form. Since the Snorunt line has done this before, I feel like it would slide right into gaining another branch of its family, and possibly one that evolves if Mega Glalie doesn't fit. No one would even be surprised to see another one pop up in a brand new generation somewhere down the line, keeping one of my favorite families relevant for even longer. Number 2, Scyther. Really, I never would have thought of this before because Scyther and Scizor were just a tight little family and that was the way of things. But then we were all thrown for a loop when Legends Arceus showed us a brand new evolution after all these years. New regional forms I would expect, but for a Pokemon line that has remained static for 2 decades to suddenly be reinvigorated was so refreshing. Well, I might be overselling it a bit, because it's not like Scyther and Scizor were poor, overlooked Pokemon like other bug types out there, since they've been fan favorites the whole time. And they didn't really remain untouched the whole time, because in Gen 6, Scizor got a Mega Evolution that people also loved. But it was one of the main focal points for people pointing to Megas as mainly gifted to already useful and popular Pokemon. But if we wanted to, that Mega could be the evolution to this setup, with Kleavor basically turning into a Cave Scyther, taking things in a totally different direction from the sleek and almost futuristic-looking opposite branch. So we could easily see a new form adapt to other kinds of medieval weaponry on its hands, like blades or axes or the classic scissors. And of course we would see it take on other types as well, so if we wanted to leave the Mega by the wayside, we might see something like a pair of dragon or even fighting bugs splitting off of the Mantis Pokemon. Granted, it might take at least another 15 years for them to get around to it like last time, but very few Pokemon lines have a 100% success rate in being cool, beloved favorites that can actually pull off being somewhat useful, so I think that this is one of the very few cases where I wouldn't even be scared for them to try again. And I'm convinced that we could see a couple more pretty sweet evolutions get squeezed out of this family. Number 1, Charcadet. I'm sure that the common answer is for people to want another evolution, but that's probably gonna happen eventually no matter what, and really not in the spirit of what we're talking about. The notion is that these Pokemon would have a set number of distinct options offering differences, and Eevee is almost infinite in its possibilities. That being said, when Charcadet was introduced for Scarlet and Violet, it jumped out at me as being the prime candidate for further branches in the future. As it stands, Armarouge and Ceruledge are pretty great Pokemon on their own, based off of a similar build, but donning their own unique weaponry and colors, even being named after different fancy colors themselves. And of course, the best part is their types. So all you would have to do is come up with different hues that you think might look good on another warrior and slap on your choice of weapon. Whether that be like a mace, or maybe a slingshot, or even an axe like with Cleavor earlier. With a bigger group of multicolored heroes wielding varying armaments, it might start to look a little too much like a Power Rangers lineup, but you can't deny that it would be amazing and so fitting to implement new branches here. Because all you'd have to do is introduce a couple new armors, and that's a perfect excuse as to why you couldn't obtain these evolutions before, because you just didn't have access to the right item. It's simple. And of course, with these new forms, you would add in different types to complement the fire, maybe even fire and fairy as the one type combination that we have yet to see. And also, I would think it could be pretty easy to see one of these armors develop further. Honestly, I would imagine something like King Gambit, but they just made that one. But some sort of greater nobility being placed on it would be a nice theming to warrant an extra stage of evolution. Maybe even having the special power of somehow being able to tap into the types of all of the other armors. However, while a final evolution would be cool to complete the Applin treatment, I honestly would just be happy with one more Charcadet branch to bring it up to the same level as the tiny apple dragon, and we can worry about more later. But those are the Pokemon that I think would be best suited to join the Triple Evolutions Club, and maybe, just maybe, gain an extra evolution on top of that. Which Pokemon would you most like to see get the Applin treatment? Let me know down in the comments. Also be sure to leave a like, share this video, and subscribe so that you too can become an Imperial today. And until next time, stay grounded.